If everyone could please have a seat, we're about to begin. Hi everyone, my name is Michael, and thank you for being here for this celebration of life for our friend Dan Thomas. I'm going to ask each of you to please silence your phones so that the program will not be interrupted. Also, we are streaming live on YouTube for family and friends of Dan who could not join us today. And if you know people that weren't aware of it, do not worry, because after the live feed concludes, there will be a video available in perpetuity, because it is, after all, YouTube. As an actor, I have learned how to punt many times, and I had to today, because this morning at 7 o'clock, my dear friend, Reverend Nancy Fuller, texted me and told me that she is very sick, unfortunately, and could not be here with us today. So I hope you will join me in sending her love and prayers that she has a full and speedy recovery. I can assure you that Reverend Nancy is irreplaceable. However, there is someone here that has stepped up with very short notice to try and fill her very large shoes and give you the proper welcome that was planned. You do have a program in front of you. It's going to be a little askew because of these changes, but we will get everything accomplished that we want to today. So I'm going to ask to come up another dear friend, Krista Bretz.
So I had a crash course this morning in reverending. Now I'm stuck with this shirt. Oh, never mind. Oh, God. Okay. I'm actually a member of my church, Center for Spiritual Living, and I'm in the process of being trained to become a practitioner, which is the next step before reverend. So I kind of feel like this is an honor, it's such an honor and a blessing to be up here and to see all of you, and I'm so grateful that you all came. So in the spirit of Reverend Nancy, hello everybody. We gather here today with hearts that hold many, many emotions. There is gratitude for a life so beautifully lived. Laughter, like crazy laughter, we know, that rises from cherished memories. And yes, the ache that comes when someone we love is no longer present in the way that we've always known them. Yet, we come together with the understanding that love is never lost. Amen. Amen. Together, we can recognize that there is one higher power, one infinite life, one divine presence, one loving intelligence expressing itself through all creation. Each of us is an expression, a unique expression of that one life. We are born into this world, we grow, we learn, we love, and when our earthly journey is complete, we do not cease to exist. We simply continue our journey in another dimension of life, or another square dance of life. Trust me. Spirit is never born and spirit never dies. Today, together, we honor the life of our beloved Dan, not because his story has ended, but because his chapter among us has been so incredibly richly written. His kindness, his laughter, his generosity, his artistry. and his unwavering commitment to helping others has become woven into the lives of everyone here. Those gifts did not disappear. They live on in us. Every act of compassion inspired by Dan, every smile prompted by one of his stories, every hand extended in service because of his example continues the beautiful work of his life. The great teacher Jesus taught that love is the most powerful force in the universe because love is the very nature of God. If that is true, and I certainly believe that it is, then every moment that Dan lived, he expressed love. Every life that he encouraged, every person he sponsored, every hug he gave, every hello, darling, he offered was an expression of the divine moving within him. That love cannot be buried. That love cannot be diminished. That love can never be taken away. It remains an eternal presence. So today, rather than asking, oh shoot, where is Dan? I miss him so much. Perhaps we might ask, where is his love? And the answer is all around us. It is in the friendships he nurtured, in the people whose lives he helped restore, in the beauty he created with his own hands, in the laughter he sparked, and in the memories we carry until tomorrow. His love continues to find expression through each and every one of us. As we share stories today, and hopefully you will, I invite you to let your hearts be open. If laughter comes, let it come freely. Dan certainly gave us plenty to laugh about. If tears come, let them come gently, for they are simply love finding its way through our hearts. And if in the midst of all of this, you find yourself feeling an unexpected sense of peace, perhaps that is Spirit or God reminding us that nothing real can ever be lost. We also recognize that grief and gratitude can stand side by side. One does not diminish another. We grieve because we have loved deeply. We give thanks because we have been blessed greatly. Today we choose to celebrate a life that was lived with passion, creativity, courage, humor, and extraordinary generosity. So may this gathering be a sacred space where every memory shared becomes a blessing, every smile becomes a prayer of thanksgiving, and every tear becomes a testimony to the love that Dan shared with us beyond time and beyond form. And as we begin this celebration, let us remember the words that he spoke. Hello, darling. Perhaps today those words carry a new meaning. They remind us that love is always welcoming us, that Spirit or God is always embracing us, and that those who have loved us are never, ever absent. They continue to greet us in memory, in gratitude, and in the quiet whisper of the heart. Let us open ourselves now to the presence of love, to the comfort of God and Spirit, and to the joy of celebrating an absolutely remarkable life. Welcome, everyone. Thank you.
I want to take a moment to acknowledge not only Krista, but David and Gary. The three of them put a lot of time and effort into putting together this celebration of life. And on behalf of everyone, I want to say thank you, and thank you to all of the volunteers today as well. I met Dan 25 years ago through David, who is my partner. And I didn't know quite what to make of Dan at the beginning. And as our friendship developed, I learned that he was the only man I ever met who could get under the hood of your car, or under the car itself, for that matter, diagnose the problem, fix it, and when he was acknowledged for it, said, "Thank you, darling." First of all, the shirt I'm wearing was given to me by Dan because it matched the cufflinks he made for me and this tie pin. I'm sorry, it's too hot to wear a tie today. But he did make me a tie. It was a hand-painted tie, and it's beautiful. And all I can say is if anyone here or who's listening, watching, was fortunate enough to have something made for them by Dan, they understand the effort, the creativity, and the passion that he put into it, as he did with everything in his life. Several years ago, I experienced a loss, and I was at the darkest point in my life. I was inconsolable. I did not want anyone around me. David was so wonderful in staving off people, family and friends. I did not want to hear from anyone. And I know that when people experience a loss, that others, they try to say the right thing. I'm sorry, they're in a better place, and they mean well. I understand that, but I was not ready to receive that. And so in a few days, I wasn't any better. David came to me and he said, "Dan's on the phone." And I went, because Dan had a way of being very direct, super direct, and I just thought, I just don't want to hear it, but I did take the call. It was twofold. He was very real with me, which was good, but there was another side to Dan, and I don't know how many people saw that side. They knew the snarky side. Dan definitely had a snarky side, and once in a while when I felt it was necessary, I gave snark back. But I can't share with you what he told me because unfortunately I don't remember the words. I wish I had written them down, truly, because they were sensitive and deeply profound. And I didn't know the words that I needed to hear at that time, but he did. And I have always remembered that. It was a side to him I did not know. But I have to tell you, I have to this day, and I always will remember that moment in my life. And with that, I will say, thank you, darling. Now to share his thoughts and memories of our friend Dan, I will call up Eric Hewlett.
Okay, good afternoon. I guess we're talking about the same guy. I really love it when we come, we've all been to an event and somebody comes up and they start talking about a person that I never knew. So when I hear Dan was snarky, he was loving, he was helpful, all these many things, it reminds me we're really, I was talking about the same person and his spirit's here with us in the room. So it's just great also to see so many people here celebrating from different walks of life. I find that's really an indication of a life well lived as well. When I see people I've never met before that'll have a similar feeling for the man. And that really just kind of is a tribute to the type of person he was and the type of life that he led. So one of my earliest memories of Dan is seeing him be of service by doing sign language for the hearing impaired. And he did that at a lot of meetings around town. And there was one time when I was speaking, and I speak kind of fast, and he kept shooting me this look. And I thought, oh, he doesn't like what I'm saying. He does not like what I'm saying. Afterwards, when he was done, he's like, can I just these hands are important to me. Can I shake that out a little bit? And I knew it was really that he was trying to keep up with me. So I'm sure that he's looking down and very grateful that he doesn't try to keep up with me today on that subject. But man, what a wonderful experience that was. So he had a very active mind, as we would like to say, right? He had a lot of different interests and talents. And whenever I visited him at home, he was always excited to show me his latest accomplishments or his newest interest. I would come over to the house, he'd have an entire clock laid out on the dining table, right? And then recently I was at his house and he was so proud to show me how he had actually extended his driveway, which took months of digging out the dirt, putting it in the trash cans, and then a few months later, he was finally ready to lay out this extra space. I'd come over, he'd be on the roof, he'd be on a ladder, something I'd tell him he should not be doing, but he was always there. You know, he was always doing something. He loved his space. We loved his space. So he was definitely of service to people in and out of the program. I know Dan from the program, but clearly he's of service wherever he goes. You talk to him about going to work at the swap meet, or he'd be doing his dancing and such. He loved to go out and do square dance. It was a great source of fun exercise for him. But he was also a ballroom dancer, and he had the tux and tails to prove it. I was at a wedding one time, and he showed up in tux and tails. And I'm like, okay, so now I feel like I'm underdressed. And you're like the most amazing person in there, but he wore it with ease, and he was that kind person too. He would use that greeting too. Hi, darling, how are you doing? And he would pause and he'd listen, because he was a person that you could really interact with and get real, and he'd get real back with you. And but some reason I was always willing to hear it from him. So that was a great gift of his as well. In more recent years, he got passionate about building and riding bicycles, of all things. You could not slow him down. He always wanted to be doing something. And you know, when he develops an interest, he goes in. Please, that'll be great. I'm used to that. Can you hear me better now? Can you hear me okay? Great, great. So Dan got this new thing he was going to start doing, building bikes, not just buy one and ride it. Like, so that's what I would do, right? But he would go and build all these bikes, patch them together, and he learned about so much of that so quickly. He was a wealth of information. Anything he got into, he learned about it. He not only wanted to know what it was, but how was it made and how did it work, which takes his art to a whole different level. So I stopped counting at about a dozen bikes. And then he just kept going. I said, you know, you can only ride one of these at a time, right? Of course, he didn't want to hear that, but I was coming back at him with that information. So, but he would cycle them out. He would do this in the new one he was working on, always very excited about that. Like I said, I would go to his house and he'd have an entire clock laid out on the table there. I mean, it's all I can do to just wind a clock, or, you know, I don't even wear a watch, right? I've got my iPhone. But it's, you know, it's so interesting too when you think about that, you know, man, that, I mean, I can't imagine how many clocks he owned. We're going to have to get a final clock count. He would give them as gifts too. So, you know, it's just interesting as well. It's kind of a bittersweet thought that a man that was surrounded by so many clocks eventually ran out of time. You know, that was one of my things here as well. But like you had said, the fact that he's here today with us, that time is a lot less finite. I mean, we continue all these things which are kind of fun. So he was also a patineur, which is somebody that applies patina and stuff to statues and such. It was always amazing. I went up to the Getty with him one time, and we were looking at these statues and such, and then there was some railing there, and he says, oh, I actually patinized that railing. I'm like, I thought this was me giving you a tour, and here we are on level ground here. And he would look at these bronzes, and he would explain to me what that was. It was another piece that was a piece of hammered copper on top of a structure. And he says, that piece right there is hammered on top of a wooden mold. And that's the way that the Statue of Liberty was made. I'm like, I mean, I know who made it and what the name and stuff, but he had that mind that was just a sieve. But then he was generous with that information as well. So now when I see that piece at work, I'm like, oh, that one, Statue of Liberty. It's great. So being a patineur as well, part of his restoration process was to maintain statues. I drive by the, what is the one that's at Magnolia and Tahunga, the Amelia Earhart statue, right? He cleaned that one up when it needed to be. So now every time I drive by her, I know she had big accomplishments in her life, but I think of Dan out there, you know, keeping this thing in shape. There was a point in time when he was in Malibu, and people had bought this home in Malibu. In the center courtyard, there was this sculpture, this bronze. And so part of his what do you call that? He had a reason to go back out there and maintain it, right? He had a contract with these people. So the neighbors got really concerned when they saw this masked man coming in with a blowtorch and a bucket of wax in Malibu. They're a little sensitive about fire. But Dan was so funny, you can just imagine the response. And then, of course, he had a response back to them, I'm sure, and let them know exactly what he needed to do. But I'm so, I don't know, amused by his stories. So the thing with the statues as well and the bronzes, he starts going deep into it. And then he says, oh, so my friend Sandy has this foundry over here in North Hollywood. Next thing you know, we're getting in his truck, we're driving over to the foundry, and we're seeing how these things are made. So, Dan always loved a field trip. Anybody that spent any time with him, he'd want to get in that truck and go somewhere else. He also always wanted to drive. Let's say that, right? And even in the end, as he was getting along in age, he still always insisted in driving. He always had a plan for the future. If I'm not mistaken, he still has an electric truck on order that hasn't been delivered yet. So I think if anybody has any information about that, let me know. Love an electric car. He also always had this stuff, like he has all these medical plans of getting teeth fixed and doing all these things in the future. So the fact that he kind of checked out of this human form right here when he did, he had other plans going. This is just where that kind of morphed into something else. And that's great. I really am going to miss him deeply, the many things about him, but I really cherish our friendship so much that I can really appreciate that, as we know, right? That grief can only exist where love once was. And so in that, I really know, I'm so grateful that he was on loan to us, that he was here, that I actually came across him and was able to spend so much time with him. I was trying to figure it out. I don't really remember meeting him, but as I kind of did the math in my life, it's been probably about 20 years, which doesn't seem like enough because, we can always get more. So I'm really going to miss him as well, and I do love that hello, darling thing. I mean, I loved when you said that. That was his greeting. Of course, when he said it to me, I thought it was all about me because clearly the world revolves around it. But that personal connection, I could be with him in a room full of people and he would still take that time to let you know that you were important and you mattered to him. And I love that. So, I just to thank Dan and say, we'll miss you, darling. We'll stay together and celebrate his time here. Thank you.
Eric, when you mentioned the statue, it reminded me of something. I don't know how many of you have ever been in North Hollywood to the Television Academy. There's a ginormous Emmy statue. And when David told me that Dan was assigned to work on that, I called Dan, and maybe not so innocently, I said, Dan, I have a favor. And he said, yes. And I said, well, when you're done with the statue, can you bring it to our home and put it in our backyard? And I got a firm no, and without a darling. So I knew he meant it. But it was worth it. He never said no before. So anyway, I would like to recall up another person who's going to share her experiences of knowing Dan. She's been a friend of mine for also 25 years via David. And she is a lady who can walk into a room full of strangers and come out with a room full of friends. And I envy that about her. So once again, I give you Krista Brett.
I feel so lucky and special. I got to come up here twice. I met Dan a little over 30 years ago through David, who's one of my BFFs. Where's my other BFF? I don't want to hurt her feelings. Debbie's my other BFF. We have to be careful with sharing the BFFs. They get their feelings hurt all the time. Anyway, so I met Dan through David. That's all I can say. Hello, darling, were the words he always said. Those were his footprints and dance prints wherever he tread. And Dan, oh Dan, was the kind of soul who made broken things and people somehow feel whole. If you knew him, you didn't wait long to see that familiar greeting, warm as could be. Not rushed, not casual, but offered with care, like you were always welcome there. Dan never once did anything halfway or small. He gave his whole heart, he gave it his all. He was artisan, craftsman, a Renaissance soul with hands that could heal anything unwhole. His clocks could fill a little shop, and watches more than a few. His bonsai, orchids, and native plants he grew. He could fix an engine with great expertise. His many computers hummed with ease. Now, some might collect postage stamps or maybe vintage wine. Dan simply thought, well, why stop at one? 35's just fine. Yes, his 35 Kirby vacuums lined the wall. And 27 bikes? Was that really all? A classy hoarder, a friend would once say, but Dan simply answered, well, they work anyway. Cufflinks and ties, hand-painted with grace. Even bow ties carried his creative trace. I was going to wear the bow tie he made, but it clashed with my outfit, so. And in the kitchen, he'd quietly prove that food could be art, and my taste buds did approve. He worked on grand places where history stands, like Bullock's Wilshire and the Getty, with his own hands. He restored the clocks there, and the gold leaves shine, bringing its glory back into design. And his own home, trust me, became a museum of art, where every object was given a heart. He built stained glass for light to dance, and rescued so many antiques at every chance. An armoire broken by earthquake and fear, rebuilt by Dan, so strong and clear. He extended his driveway on his own. He hauled the rocks from Latuna Canyon. Ugh, makes me just groan. Once he spotted, while driving, an 1810 chair in rubble on the ground. Of course, he then made it perfectly sound. Each month, Dan and his friends would gather. Chicken foot is what we call, with dominoes, potluck, and laughter from all. For birthdays and friendship, our hearts would entwine. The tables open, Dan's phrase will stay in our mind. He learned ASL, and this is what I've heard, to spy or watch a handsome beau, a boyfriend apparently that he was watching, so he learned the ASL. This is what I heard, okay. Which became a passion, not watching the bows, but the ASL. Although, yeah, okay, well, as we all know, he gave voice at AA meetings with his hands, building bridges, changing lives, and helping dreams expand. AA was central, his anchor, his ground. Those he sponsored were blessed he was around. As a sponsor, a guide, a presence so strong, where people were finally told and felt they belong. He became Loretta Locklips, drag queen extraordinaire, recreating Priscilla with laughter and flair. Ballroom dancing, at first he would resist. David and I both had to drag him. Then West Coast swing, cha-cha, two-step he never missed. Square dancing filled his life with joy. And of course he had to dance the girl and the boy. Square dancing with such terrific people every week. Perfecting his plus skills was seriously what he'd seek. So you see, Dan never mended things without including hearts. He knew that every masterpiece begins with broken parts. His humor could be wicked sharp and timing so profound. Each laugh and playful tease caused friendships to abound. Look at this. This is amazing. Perhaps that's why he'd roam the day, finding beauty others threw away. And maybe, just maybe, people aren't so different in the end. We all need someone like Dan to help us mend. Thank you.
Well, I realize that's a tough act to follow, but at this time, we would like to invite anyone and everyone who would like to come up and share their thoughts and feelings about Dan. There's no order, there's no numbers. Whoever wants to do it, do it. So is there anybody who would like to be the first person to come up? I'll wait. Okay. Thank you. And after this gentleman is done, just whoever wants to come up next, feel free.
Hello, my name's Michael, and my first thought was, who would like to come up? I learned that as a secretary, you don't ask it that way. Who would be willing to come up? You get more responses, because I was one of those people who say, well, I don't want to, I don't like to share today, but I will. I was blessed to know Dan in a different way beyond the snarky side. During COVID, I had a book study at my house, and we were reading the Four Agreements. And I was thinking, you know, in that alcoholic way that I seem to possess, expecting how he's going to respond to this. And he surprised me every time. His responses, his insights were always on target. They were really thought-provoking. And I'm just so happy to be able to go beyond one persona that he presented and see a deeper side to him. Because he was a friend that was truly, he was someone that I could depend upon for an honest response that would be helpful to whatever that I asked. So again, I appreciate the time that I had with Dan. Thank you.
I am Richard, and I've met Dan in this room, sitting. There used to be risers here, and he'd always sit in the front row. And he and a guy named Len, and he was always somebody that I listened to when he spoke, because a lot of what he said made sense. There were some times when I would talk to him about something, and he would say something that I really didn't expect. There was one time I was talking about this one guy in a meeting who was just pissing me off, and I couldn't get to my happy space. And so I said, well, I'm going to talk to Dan about it at the break. So I went and talked to Dan about it, and I'm telling him, he says, oh, I hate that guy. But then he also said, well, evidently other people here needed to hear what he said. And you know, that made it all okay. When we found out he had passed away, we were having a brunch for somebody's birthday, and I was saying, well, do we still want to do the brunch? And the guy said, well, what do you think Dan would say if he was here to ask about that? You know, I mean, my God, just because I'm dead doesn't mean that you can't have a party. And you know, that was him. And you know, I really loved him. He gave me so much over the years, And, you know, my life has been better because of him. And it was really something too, because when I found out he passed away, it was really hard to be sad because he lived his life right up to the end. The man was 80 years old and on his roof with a jackhammer. You know, I mean, you can't ask for more than that. So I'm so grateful he was part of my life. And now we're going to have Gary come up and say something.
Well, my name's Gary, and I too had the privilege of knowing Dan for about 37 years, actually, and I met him in this room, along with my friend Richard and other people, Kenyon, and what can I say? Life is life. Life is life. And life affords us an opportunity to see life in other people, in the body of other people. So I was fortunate among many people to see Dan as an example of life, an example of what life could be, and the wisdom and the intelligence and the integrity. Those are words that, in my estimation, were how he best describes how he could live his life, how he lived his life. He was a mentor to me for over 37 years, and he gave this information to me freely without any hope of anything in return whatsoever, except he probably wished that I would be the best person that I could be. I was talking to somebody here just today, and about this, and I said, you know, it's because of what we learn in our program and what information that we gather, the wisdom that we gather, and the experiences that we have that help us to navigate through life. And I remember something that I remember Dan sharing in a situation that was like this one, where we were celebrating the life of someone. And he said it's because of what we do in the program that it affords us the opportunity to accept the unacceptable. Those are one of the pearls of wisdom that Dan left with me. I was one of the people that benefited from his being here, and I'm going to continue to honor his presence by being an example of what he taught me. Thank you. Now Kenyon would like to speak.
Oh my God, that is so wrong. And Dan would love it. He would just sit in the back and cackle at that. Oh my God. I met Dan on my second AA meeting over 39 years ago. It was the first meeting I went to by myself. And I was not well, because we don't get in here well. So oh my God, I was so scared because I was going by myself to this meeting, and I think it was a gay meeting, and I wasn't sure about that, and it was my second meeting. I didn't know how things worked. And I was going to go in there, so I went around the block few times, and then I stopped and just shored up all the reserves I could get, and I walked in. Now, at the time, I wore all black and sunglasses to be as invisible as I could possibly be. I dyed my hair, what was running away from me really quickly, black. All the way down, just all the way down. And I wanted to be invisible, and I walked into that room, and there were 6 people there. And in a circle. And I don't know why I stayed, except I was so scared. And I thought, oh, I'm just gonna ride this out. All I have to do is get through this hour, and then I can go. And I don't remember who shared or whatever, but I remember Dan sitting next to Lynn McNeil. And Lynn McNeil kind of had a gray bouffant kind of thing going on and blue suede shoes. I'll never forget it. And the two of them together were just vicious and perfect, you know? And I sat there, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but Dan turned around and he looked and he said, "Let's hear from you." And the moral of that story now is that's how Dan was. He found the invisible person and said, "Let's hear from you." And he did it in such a loving way. It wasn't like, you know, "Get up here," or "You're doing it wrong," or "You should." It was nothing negative. It was, "I'm going to include you in a very loving way, and I'm just going to pull you in very gently, little duckling, and let you share." And God knows what came out, you know, in my second AA meeting. But that's how he was, and that's what he was to me, was over the years how many times he very gently included me into a life that was bigger than the one I was living and made things less scary. Could not get me to go square dancing, was not going to do it. No, there's a line, there's a limit. But even then, you know, even then, it was just simple. You are okay, I love you, and you're included. You could just be here. And that's a great, great gift that I hope I can pass on. Thanks. Oh, I watched. Of course I watched. I saw him in drag. I did all that stuff. I was scared of it. I was like, "Oh my God, what are you doing? And how can you be so..." The thing is, how can you be so brave? How can you get out there in front of all these people and do that? That was the thing. So yeah, I watched, and I learned, and I benefited from it. Thanks. I ain't doing it. I ain't calling
Hello, can you hear me now? My name's Jeff Wise. I met Dan square dancing. I don't know if it's been 4 or 5 years, maybe 5 or 6, but he always arrived early, and he helped set up the room. He'd wheel a whole stack of chairs and then undo them and then do the ones over there and then ones over here to help the class out so we could start on time and have seats to sit in. That's just how loving Dan was, and giving at the same time. But I never realized, I didn't get to meet him on a personal basis, and I didn't get to know how much talent he had in so many different ways. I do stained glass, I do fuse glass. I'd love to see some of his stained glass sometime if it were possible. But I'm just sorry that I didn't get to know him better. I didn't know he knew all those things, or he could do all those things. And so I loved having him at our square dances, and we all make mistakes once in a while. And the caller would say, "Dan, there's an open space over there. You're supposed to be over there," instead of over there. But anyway, we all do the same thing. Just saying that I wish I knew Dan better, and it's my loss. But what I know of him, it was very dear. And I'm glad to have known him as long as I have. Thank you.
Where are you? Well, thank you. Well, my other half isn't good enough. Okay, so we met Dan at Square Dancing, of course, and he would take the ladies' role. And so I said to him one time, you know, why don't you wear a miniskirt? And he said, I'm not that kind of girl. And then a couple weeks later, I asked him the same question, and you give the answer of what he said. I said, why don't you wear a miniskirt? I think you'd look great in it.
He said, I have my limits.
Thank you.
My name is Jim. Dan was very influential when I first came in the program. I first met him probably around 40 years ago, and in those days I was still coming in and out. I met him at Kittredge. There was a gay men's meeting during the week there, and he came in late, and they used to have these square things you sit on, and it was my first gay meeting. And he came and sat down next to me and scared the shit out of me. It was the way he said hello to me. It was like, hi, you know, when he sat down. And I didn't know gay people. I didn't know gay people till I came to AA. I was always, the only way I found gay people was in the ways, you know, in the darkness of night, you know. And, so anyway, him and Len McNeil and a bunch of other guys were taking me with them to dinner after the meetings. And that was a regular habit then, you know. I think somewhere along the line we stopped doing it because everybody was getting fat, you know. But we'd be saying things and he'd be dishing away, you know, and laughing. And it was such a good example for me to be around that, you know. And took me a long time to be comfortable in my skin as a gay man. Still sometimes things bother me, but I do accept myself now because I had good examples. And when I got sober, my counselor told me, you need people like life itself, make them sober people. And so that's what I did. And he'd sit around the table, they used to use terms back then I don't hear anymore, like, oh, Mary, please, that was one. What else? Miss Thing, get her, you know, and things like that. And it was always a fun thing. And, you know, I saw Dan the week before he died at a meeting, a gay meeting at Radford on Saturday night. And the next week I couldn't make it to the meeting, and Gary announced it on the Zoom portion of that meeting, and I just really was torn up. I couldn't believe what a deep reaction I had. And I've been feeling his presence. I felt him last night when I was watching a movie, and I feel him. I feel him. He's in my heart. And I'm grateful that we had him, and thank you.
Hi, my name's Leonard, and for the non-alcoholic people in the room, you'll notice a little pattern. We're all coming up here and only saying our first name. My name's Leonard, and we'll usually say, my name's Leonard, and I'm an alcoholic. So that we're leaving that part out, but that if the cadence feels a little bit off, because I noticed John came up and he gave his last name, and That would be typical probably in a thing like this, but that's just the AA influence, I guess, carrying over. Anyway, I met Dan, I think in 1990, I want to say, and I was in AA a couple of years at that time, and Dan was the signer, the sign language interpreter at a really big meeting, in Colfax in a church fellowship hall. It was a huge meeting. And I would sit and watch Dan, really because I thought I might have a chance with one of the deaf people. And when I shared that with Dan, he told me how he got into interpreting, and I was like, dang. And anyway, the thing is, I didn't really get to know Dan. I saw him at the meeting, and I would speak to him there, but I didn't get to really know him until about 10 years later. I met him through a man who's passed on named Scott West. And anybody who knew Scott was also in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was a character, this guy. And Scott was a lot like Dan. Scott could fix anything, and Scott did neon and a bunch of other kind of hobbies like that, and woodwork. He did a lot of woodwork, and in fact, Scott left his house to Dan, which I'm sure worked out just perfect because he had a workshop there and everything. And I'd lived with Scott for a little while. Scott used to rent his house out to people who were newly sober, gay people who were newly sober. So it was a sort of safe haven, sober living kind of place where you could, pay $500 a month and you get a bed and maybe share a room with somebody. Anyway, when Scott died, I think the expectation was that Dan would continue that, but Dan really didn't have the kind of personality for that. It didn't work out. It just didn't. And Dan was better off living alone, and because Dan had a lot of rules, right? I didn't live there then, but I knew people that did, and he had a lot of rules, and it just didn't work out. But the thing is that Scott and Dan both, for me, I had a hard time accepting being gay. And the thing is that I came up in a time when a lot of people were dying. In fact, a lot of the guys who would have been Dan's age aren't with us. He's one of the few that are left. There were so many talented, wonderful men and women, but mostly men, from that generation, from that cohort that we lost. And Dan, I'm a lot like Dan. I'm a car guy, and I kind of artistic and all of this stuff. And so Dan, I loved him, and Dan sponsored me briefly, and there was a period of time I had been sober, and then I wasn't. And that's a funny thing about alcoholism, and then I wasn't. And I was trying to get sober again, and many years I kept coming back to during that period of time, Dan was my sponsor, and a sponsor in AA is somebody that sort of guides you. Yeah, and he would say to me, "Oh, honey." And he didn't take any shit. I mean, he would hear me talking and let me know that what you're saying is bullshit, basically. And just a lovely man. And I have a set of metric wrenches that are combination open-end wrench on one end with a socket on the other end with a little swivel that Dan gave me. And I always think of him whenever I use those. It's just an odd combination of wrenches like that. And anyway, gonna miss him and think about him often. So.
Hello, I'm Maggie, and hi everybody. And Dan would get a hoot out of this. His cackle, as someone already mentioned, because I rarely wear makeup, and for Dan I had to, because I had to, I don't know, not exactly girl it up, but do something like that. And half the people I know that I've known for many years, from many meetings, didn't recognize me, including like Laura. I've known her my whole sobriety. Didn't recognize me, and and Dan would get a kick out of the fact, and I'm sure is getting a kick out of the fact that because Gary, who is my sponsor, comes up here and says those beautiful words, and I start crying. I'm looking like Tammy Faye over here, trying to, I'm pretty sure most of it's going to be running down my face. But anyway, I met Dan. I'm going to try and not be Tammy Faye right now. I met Dan at the Colfax meeting. I was a newcomer. And this was about 22 years ago, over 22 years ago. And of course, I saw him signing. And, you know, I see him cackling with all these deaf people, and I'm like, what the heck are they talking about? And it wasn't for the stalking purpose, for the reason that he learned sign language, or for anyone else, that Leonard learned, you know, was hanging out with the deaf people, but I just thought they were having so much fun, and I wanted to be a part of it, you know. So I started, you know, with Dan's encouragement, taking sign language classes at Pierce College. And, you know, Dan brought me into the deaf community. And there wasn't anyone that I was interested in. There weren't any girls at the time, but, you know, there was this lovely group of men. And, you know, I kept going. I kept learning sign language. And I didn't know if there would be a need for an interpreter, but so I'm sorry. I can't do SimCom, sorry. So anyway, so I just kept on with it and, you know, met some beautiful, wonderful people. And here's the beautiful thing, is like, you know, I learned, you know, I mean, when you're taking sign language classes and you're learning sign language, you go out and you socialize in the deaf community. But you go to coffee events and you meet some people and you go up and you start signing to them awkwardly, and they're like, you know, so gracious and beautiful and forgiving because we're using their language. But we did stuff with Dan. We'd go back when there was an Oil Can Harry's. And there would be a group of us from AA, and the deaf people are coming too. And we're like, we're all, you know, not line dancing. We're doing the dancing in the circle thing, the two-step and everything. And it's just amazing. This was before Niall DeMarco won, you know, whatever that dancing show, Dancing with the Stars, deaf man who won Dancing with the Stars. So, you know, but if it weren't for Dan, I would not have had this new career that came to me, along with the current career I have. I am now a sign language interpreter, but just the love that Dan had for the deaf community. And there is a gay recovery house, Van Ness, and Dan would get a call whenever a deaf person would come in. And he would drive from North Hollywood to go pick someone up, bring them to the Moore Park meeting, which was over in Studio City, drive them back over to Van Ness house, and then come back home. And this is when, you know, of late, you know, in the past 4 or 5 years, that's the kind of man Dan was. He would give of himself. And I'll just end with this, you know, generosity is not a big enough word for Dan. I went to his house, and he's showing me all the stuff, which, let's talk about overwhelm. Like, woo! You know, looking at all the stuff, just trying to, you know, your eyes land on something, and I felt like I was having, like, some kind of, you know, deficit disorder thing where I couldn't look at everything. But, you know, my eyes did land. Like Dan, I love to go and do different things. I took equine classes at Pierce College, and, you know, Dan, you know, so many people spoke of so many things that Dan has done, but he was a photographer. And, you know, a long time ago, he invited me and my sister when she first adopted her daughter and this deaf man that he was sponsoring, and we all went over there, and he took beautiful pictures of this new baby that my sister adopted, and I have those, you know. But anyway, so I forgot where I was, and it doesn't matter. But Dan was an amazing, beautiful man, and I know you all would recognize that cackle if you heard it right now. And thank you. Love you, Dan.
Hi, I'm Jeff. Yeah, I'm Jeff. Hi, Jeff. I don't really have too much extra I can add. I mean, the picture that everybody has painted of him makes me, like, grateful that I got to meet him, got to know him. I knew him mostly through AA meetings, of course. I'd come to AA meetings and I'd see his truck, right? That Toyota. Remember the Toyota truck, the gray one? I miss it. Yeah. But I do believe that, Spirit doesn't die. I think he's here with us. And I think he's grateful that he's remembered by so many people. I believe that he placed sobriety as his foundation of his life. He did. I mean, I've heard him share in meetings so many times. And I remember, like, the first time I heard him share, I thought, oh my God, this guy's crazy. He's fucking crazy. And then I thought, oh my God, I relate. I relate to what he's sharing. Then I started thinking, God, am I crazy? Maybe. I don't know. But I believe that he followed his life because he was on that life path because he stayed sober. I believe that he wasn't there's a phrase in AA, we're not a glum lot, right? He was not a glum person. I mean, if he was, I didn't see that part of him. It's odd. My sponsor for a while lived in the guest house where he lived. It's just the nature of being of service, and that's what I think that's what he enjoyed doing. He enjoyed sharing his life with other people. I think that he really enjoyed his life. I think he did everything that he wanted to do, and he did it with gusto, and that's something that I try to take to heart. He had a certain courage. It takes courage to come up here, by the way. And I don't think if he was afraid, I didn't see it. I did not see that. But I first met him when I first got sober back in 1989, and I stayed sober for a couple decades, and eventually I went back out and had to do more nonsense. Recently just celebrated 13 years of sobriety. And when I came back to the rooms, he remembered me. And I remembered him. And the first time I ever saw him was when he was doing the signing, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. I just want to throw it out there to the universe that Daniel be missed. And I'm grateful I got to know you.
Thanks.
My name is Reggie, and I'm an alcoholic. Oh my gosh, that is just common for me to say up here. Why am I up here right now? Because of all the shares that I've heard. Because I heard one word, and it's courage, and Dan had it. And he reminded me of me. Years ago now, I had to move to East LA from the Silver Lake Echo Park area where I got sober. I had 19 or 20 years sober, and I moved to East LA. I moved all of my stuff in my apartment. And then I said, now I got to get to a meeting. And there were none. But there was a directory. I had a phone book with lots of numbers of people that I know in the program. The first person I called was a guy named Charles. This is definitely going to be a share about Dan. And he says, I go to a meeting in Moore Park. I'll pick you up and we can go. And I'll drop you back off at home. And I'm like, what? And he lived in Pasadena. He says, it's right on my way. And I said, okay. And I didn't worry about what I was going to do the next week or the next week after that. But I need to tell you, for 3 years, it was never a problem for me getting there on Sunday. 2 buses, 2 trains, whatever. And I kept going back for 3 years. Now, walking into a new meeting, I'm shy. still at night. Well, not shy. I just learning how to socialize still, because I always used to need a drink. And Alcoholics Anonymous in 19 or 20 years, so it just keeps showing up. So I walked in, and that meeting embraced me. People came over to me that I only knew one person in a room filled like this, just one. I didn't know Dan, I didn't know Gary, I didn't know Kenyon, I didn't know a lot of people that I know their names now. And I kept going, and I kept going. Then I sat in the back row. Kenyon knows what that row is. Everybody knows, it's the back of the room, right before where you put the chairs in, and Dan sat on the corner. And he did have some snarkiness about him. And I said, I'm never going to speak to him. He's going to chew me up and spit me out. I just know it. I just know it. And I sat back there, he sat back there, Eric sat back there, and we sat in the back row. And we had our own little boot camp, and I felt a part of. And I said, this isn't right. We shouldn't be back here talking like this. But then I learned to laugh. And one day, one evening, one Sunday evening, it was break time, and me and Dan were sitting there alone. And he said something, like someone else shared. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was directly to me. And it caught my attention. I said, what was that? And I turned, and it was him, and he was smiling. The next thing he said, and I don't remember, but it was something to the effect of, you belong and you're here, and you're okay just the way you are. That's the way I can say it today. And he smiled. And every time after that I came in, no, he didn't say, darling, welcome, but he said, I knew that I was welcome. Shortly after that, I said, okay, 3 years, it's time for me to take a commitment at that meeting, and I took secretary commitment. And after that week that I was supposed to start, about the next 2 weeks, the pandemic hit. I was just at that meeting maybe 4 months ago or so, and Gary and Dan were there, maybe longer than that, but I hadn't been to that meeting because it's so hard for me to get to. And Dan was there, and I said, I'll speak to him the next time I come, and I didn't get a chance to go over and say hi because I didn't know he wasn't going to be here. So and when I heard about this celebration, Gary and I were on the phone, I called Gary, and I just knew I needed to be here. I don't know why. But I needed to be here, and I talked to Gary. Gary said, you'll get there, and he saw to it that I made it tonight. And the person that, if I met you tonight and we talked and I socialized, it's because of this Moore Park meeting that brought me out of that shell. People like Dan, people like Gary, and I just have to come up and say thank you for welcoming me. Oh my gosh, Maggie. I didn't recognize Maggie. So this is the meeting, and I have a home group and I have other people, but this meeting, Moore Park meeting, Dan and people like Dan and all of you have a bit of him in you, which makes me come up and share the night, make me complete. And this does still happen in Alcoholics Anonymous. You walk into a room, and this is the way it's meant to be. This is why we're here. And so I carry that example. And I think I'm a lot like Dan.
I'm so sorry to do this, but the senior moment that I had was overcome by the memory, and so I just want to finish out the story that I said generosity was not a big enough word for Dan. So I went to his home, and my eyes landed on these beautiful bookend horses. They're just brass, beautiful horse heads and shoulders, and just commented on them. 3-4 weeks later, the mailman comes up to my house looking bedraggled and delivers this box, and I open it up, and Dan had sent me the horse heads. Beautiful.
My name is Helen, and I am an alcoholic also. And I just wanted to come up and just share with you the fact that, he was the example of what I think we all hope to become in AA. And I only knew him from the rooms, you know. But like people had already mentioned, he was the signer at that Saturday Night Colfax meeting, which was a huge meeting. And now, here for the last few years, it's been a very small meeting, but Dan is still there. And he hasn't brought people that he signs for lately for a while. But to me, I was just telling a friend yesterday that I was going to a memorial today to just honor the man that set an example for me that I try to follow, and that is to be of service. You know, so it's perseverance and dedication and love are the words that came to mind for me about what Dan demonstrated for me, and I just wanted to share that with all of you. Loved him.
I think it goes without saying that Dan made a very strong impact on so many lives. And for me, that's a life well lived. Right now, we're going to show a video that Gary put together for us all about Dan. I know I said the same thing when I saw those younger pictures of Dan. It was like, wow. Who knew? I want to say to the people that are watching this on YouTube, because you can't see, we have a full house here, which I expected, knowing what I knew about Dan and all of the people that he knew in his life. And the two of the people, oh, thank you, showing it. two of the people that I'm sure are watching right now, I want to give our collective thoughts to, and that's his daughter Pauline and his granddaughter Shelby and their families. So we send you our love and our thoughts about Dan. Now we're going to break. We have a lot of food. Thank you to everybody who provided that in there. And at that time, they're going to clear out this room. And for those who are willing to square dance, you are more than welcome to. There's all different levels here, beginners, experience, feel free. It's all, yes, you can.
Thank you so much. There will be lessons. It's not like you have to know how to do it. You're going to be instructed. It's a blast. And if you leave, I will find you.
She said that, I didn't. Okay, so please help yourself. Enjoy. Thank you.